Hey everyone, it's Mark. Thanks for joining me today. With me today on my podcast is Toma Doring. Toma is the owner of Tri-City Paints. That's in British Columbia. Toma is a single store retailer, and I've spent a bit of time recently writing about the business model of single store retailers. And I did a podcast recently with James Pace, who was also a single store retailer. You know, the topic is one that's interesting to me. I only had 2 stores in New York Metro at the time that I sold about 3 years ago. And when I was first in the business, single store dealers were quite common. When I had first joined All Pro, maybe there were 150 members and they represented 200 stores or something along those lines. And even when I first got into the business and opened up my second store in probably around 1995 or 6 or somewhere around there, we were the only retailer in the Bronx with Benjamin Moore that had 2 locations. Everybody else was a single store. But the business model changed over the last, number of decades, and some of those changes ended up positioning the retailer channel for the vitality that it's experiencing right now. Most dealers now are, 4, 5, and even bigger. But there is still a category of micro retailers out there, 1 and 2 store operators, and they have some really interesting challenges that they face. And in addition to that, they have some really interesting opportunities. And so I wanted to have Toma on to talk about some of them because she is doing a really dynamite job growing her business and using her standing as a paint store to sell more decor products to the customers coming into her store already with redecorating on their minds from the paint job. And so I actually, when I've written about these topics recently about small dealers, I've had a number of small dealers reach out to me. And so that's why I wanted to do a couple of these. And so I appreciate Toma making the time. I've shared with retailers that I speak with. I'm currently consulting for 2 micro chains, and I've been honest with both of them, as I would be with any independent paint retailer. If you have 1 or 2 stores and your focus is just on selling paint, if you're a Benjamin Moore or PPG or whatever is your main line, it's not enough. And looking forward, it's going to continue to be a struggle for you. But the thing that doesn't mean that the only solution is necessarily to get to 4 or 5 or 6 stores. That's a good one. But if your inclination is to keep your business small and you're an independent retailer, so your business should reflect your personality and your tolerance for risk and all other things that are important to you. But within the 1 store model, there are some challenges, but there are certainly some opportunities to overcome those challenges. And one of the ways to do that is with decor. And so Toma's doing a really outstanding job in that way. And so I wanted to give her the chance to tell you a little bit about what she's doing. And she is absolutely hysterical. She's one of the funniest people that I've ever had on the show before. This is actually an episode that's a little bit on the long side because some of the stuff that I would normally cut out of an episode when I make them is just the side and the background chatter is just so hysterical because she's so funny that I decided to leave it in. So enjoy the episode with Toma. Like and subscribe. If you're a small dealer, you have some questions, as always, reach out to me. I'm happy to try to help you or answer your questions, or if you want some other expertise that I think might exist somewhere in the industry for another part of your business, I'm happy to help you find it. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. With me today is Toma Doring. Toma is an independent retailer in Canada. She's from Tri-City Paint and Design Center in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. Toma, thank you for joining me today.
Hello, Mark, and thank you for having me on your show. It's a great pleasure.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for making the time. So before we get into what life is like for a paint retailer in British Columbia right now, why don't you tell me a little bit about your history and how you ended up in the paint business?
It started back in 1992, which is now 30 years ago. And my husband and I wanted to work together, and we were looking at different businesses and kind of see what is recession proof, so to speak, as far as a retail business goes, and came upon a opportunity with a Benjamin Moore paint store. And we figured, when times are good, people are buying, selling their houses and painting and renovating. And when times are not so good, they're still painting and kind of staying put. So we opened up the paint store. I come from a background of selling real estate and doing administrative work. And I figured that would be kind of my role, was the administrative end of things in the store. And it changed very quickly when I realized I needed to be out on the floor, talking to people, helping them with their projects. My very first customer ever was doing a project of stripping some furniture. And so I was giving her all of the advice and the tips and the products that she needed, none of which were eco-friendly at the time. And partway through the process, I said to her, are you the one that's going to be doing this project? And she says, oh yeah, I love doing this kind of stuff. And I said, well, I think maybe somebody in your condition shouldn't be using these types of products, right? Mm-hmm. And she goes, she puts her hand on my shoulder, and she was very gracious. She says, oh, honey, she says, I'm not pregnant. I'm just fat. And it's like, oh, so that was my first customer experience in retail.
I'll tell you something funny. My daughter's mother, my ex-wife, who I jokingly call my baby mama, my ex-wife lost a job that way. She walked into the elevator. She was working. This was when we were young, 25 or 8 years old, or whatever. She was working for a temp agency, and she stepped into the elevator, and the owner of the agency was there, and she noticed the bump, and so she said, "Hey, congratulations! What are you doing?" And the woman said, "I'm just fat." And that was the end of her career. So, hey, these things happen.
Gosh.
These things happen.
Yeah.
Well, you learned a valuable lesson about what to say to fat people, or what not to say to fat people.
Or pregnant women. They can be looking at wallpaper books and doing baby rooms, and I will not say a thing.
I've always said, if I don't see a baby hanging out from between her legs, I don't ask if she's pregnant or not. It's just not, it's not worth the risk,
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right.
And so you're in the store now, you are more responsible for the decorating end of it. And I saw on your website, you have a Toma and Company Designs business that you're running, it seems, out of the store, right?
Well, it came very organically, actually. Originally, they would come in with their projects for painting, and they'd be doing a whole house and haven't got a clue of where to start. And then I kind of had this idea that, hey, maybe I should go out to their houses and help them with their colors. And that's how that was born. And originally, in my naivete, I didn't charge them for the consultation, thinking, they're just going to come by and buy the paint, and that's what I'm doing it for, right? And I wised up soon enough and carried on from there. And
so now you do full design services, but you send a bill with it.
That's right.
So I haven't had a Canadian retailer on for quite a while, actually. So before we get into it, why don't we talk a little bit about what the competitive environment is in British Columbia? Are there other Benjamin Moore retailers, Home Depots, Sherwin-Williams? I really can't say I know much about that market.
All of the above. Yes. So we are in a community, it's called the Tri-Cities, made up of 3 different cities, and Coquitlam and Port Coquitlam being the 2 major ones. Population is probably about 180,000 in the main city. And we have everything. We have Home Depot, we have Rona, which is now Lowe's, your Canadian Tires, which is our big box stores, Sherwin-Williams, Dulux. A lot of the companies have gotten eaten up over time, and have now been consolidated with the other companies, ICI and what have you. But they're all there, they're all present. Benjamin Moore stores are all around, a little closer than what I think they should be, but that's my humble opinion. And yeah, it's been a difficult few years, as it has everywhere. Vancouver's been particularly hard hit after, there's been the COVID, then there's been the Texas deep freeze, which we're still suffering from material standpoint. But what happened here last year was that first we had they call them atmospheric rivers. So all of this nasty weather. Then we had a heat dome and lots of forest fires. and then massive flooding, which knocked out a major bridge in between the mountain range, which connects us to the rest of Canada. So we
Oh,
were
wow.
cut off probably for about 2 months, I believe,
Oh,
from
wow.
any supply chain. So they had to go shorter routes or down through the States and back up again.
And
So
so were you able to get material from, I know you had said Benjamin Moore is your big paint vendor. Were you able to get material from them during that 2 months?
whatever was in the warehouse,
Right.
because everything kind of stopped and all of the shipments were returned, like sent back to Edmonton to warehouse until they could come through. And it's trickled through, but
Here's the good news.
still
They
had a
didn't have any paint for you back then anyway. They were out
no,
of
they
stock.
didn't.
So, right.
That's right.
So no
That's
big
right.
tragedy there.
Oh, so we're still recovering from that because our warehouse has not been able to replenish to the capacity that it needs to be at. You know, people come in for 12, 15 gallon orders and they leave with two.
Yeah.
So it's pretty tough. Yeah.
And what do they say? How long until you're able to sort of get back to normal in that regard?
Oh, don't expect it this year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, the supply chain issue is obviously affecting dealers that same way down here in the States. Obviously, the bridge did not blow here in the States, but at the same time, we're reaching a time where there seems to be enough paint and dealers seem to be able to, for the most part, start meeting their needs. But up until very recently, that's been a disaster here in the States as well.
Yeah, we even tried, not us, but a different innovative retailer bought some skids out of Washington.
Yeah.
I guess we're not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, good on him. He found a way to get paint.
Yeah, any port in a storm, I guess, right?
Yeah, for sure.
What are some of the challenges that you guys have had to overcome, and how have you gone about the business of overcoming them as the channel sort of shows a preference for multi-location retailers?
Well, that's for sure. I mean, we've had numerous challenges as any business. We were in our first location for roughly 18 years, and then the landlord decided to double our rent, and we thought, tried to negotiate, and that wasn't going anywhere. So we had no choice but to move, and that move started a chain of events that we're still paying for, so to speak.
Yeah.
So we moved just not far, maybe 1 kilometer, but it seemed to be enough anyways to affect our business. And then there we were for 8 years, and then the landlord decided to sell the building and the new purchaser didn't want any tenants. So we were forced to move again. And so we are now settled in this nice little location for 4 years. But each time your clientele changes somewhat. Certain amounts will follow you, but certain amounts, that loyalty just isn't there when it's another 5 minutes to drive somewhere, right?
Right.
And then in the meantime, Benjamin Moore put in another paint store in the area where that 1 kilometer difference where we moved away from before. So in that general area. So they're 3 kilometers away from us, which is very close. So yeah, and in a community that isn't that huge really, and that's affected us. But then they own 8 stores heading west, so into Vancouver. And then on the other side, we've got other store owners that are multiple owners.
Yeah. And they do have some advantages when it comes to buying, and even to your
Absolutely.
point, negotiating leases and stuff like that. There are some advantages. So how have you used specifically Décor to help sort of offset those advantages that the multi-store chains have? Because to me, it's interesting. The one store business model is not a great one if you're just out there just selling, your brand of paint. I'm a Benjamin Moore store, I'm a Pittsburgh store, whatever it is. If it's just paint and you've got one store, even if you're doing millions in business, I don't love your business model. So how have you used Décor to sort of fight that?
I mean, with the multi-store owners, it becomes a a race to the bottom, like who can give the best deal to the contractor, and they're working on 20% margins, and
Yeah.
nobody can survive on those kinds of margins. In fact, they're selling paint now for less than what we sold it 10 years ago. X number of price increases.
Right.
So that's been the most challenging. And that's where we thought, well, okay, let's pivot. And that's what we did with the home decor. So we started with the window coverings, because as I'm in the home, you see all the other things that people need and don't even realize that they need them until it's too late for me to be able to help them with it.
The great value of a home visit is
Yeah.
the opportunity to sell more product.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
You're in there talking paint. You're in there talking paint colors. Let's talk throw pillows. Let's talk, bunting around the windows or whatever.
Everything. Yes, that's right.
One of the things that I wanted to spend a lot of our time on today was the role of consultations in your business. So let's talk about what sort of consultations you offer and how you use them in your business.
So it started out, of course, with your basic color consultation. And then, with different training over time, I'm developing a real niche where I'm specializing myself. So people come and seek me out. I've done their parents' home now. Their children are buying homes, and now I'm going into their homes. But part of what is important to me is bringing wellness into the home. So it really is. The color is not just something that's nice to look at or keeps your walls looking fresh or what have you. Color also has a lot of subconscious effects on our psyche. And especially with the amount of time that we're spending at home these days, it's very important to feel good in your space. And that has to do not just with color, it also has to do with the circadian rhythm and our lighting. Everything has now gone into very hard surfaces. So also the acoustics, which is where the fabrics come in. So really doing my consultations now involves all of the senses, not just the visual.
When you go into the home for somebody, is that a fee-based service that you're offering them? Is that something that you're including in the purchases? How are you handling that?
It is a fee-based service, and they do get set up with a discount on their paint when they're ready to do their project. Some people are DIY and want to do it themselves, so they appreciate that. Other homeowners will have contractors do it. And then that's where it becomes a little bit more challenging, because they can go to any store, or they'll say, oh yeah, we can match their colors and use it in Sherwin-Williams or whatever else they happen to have in there. But yes, we do encourage the homeowner to come in, and we explain to them that we are independently owned, and the store down the street is not supporting us. It is supporting another corporation. The other big change now where we have to figure out how to pivot is the window covering industry. And I know you do a paint podcast.
No, we have a lot of dealers listening are very similar to you. They're paint, window coverings, etc.
So in Canada, as of May 1st, they have gone to extremes with the child safety regulations. So now we can't have anything with any type of cord on it.
Oh, wow.
Which, yeah, it really is challenging. And not everyone can afford to motorize all of their shades. And it's to the extent where they're trying to problem solve. Of course, anytime you're dealing with government, there's a great deal of red tape. So in the
United States and Canada, right? That's
good Lord.
That's not just you guys. Yeah, not just you guys.
Yeah, for sure. So that's our big hurdle right now.
One of the reasons why I got out of the business when I did, and I'm out going on 3 years now, 2.5 years. One of the reasons I got out is that we had 2 stores in New York. And I saw all around me, sort of what was going on. And I saw the effects on my business. And I realized that, this just 2 stores just selling Benjamin Moore paint is really not going to be enough to last long term. And my feeling was I needed to do one of 2 things. I either needed to pivot and become a decor store, because I do think that's an excellent business model for a small retailer, or I needed to pivot the other direction and maybe add 2, 3, 4 more stores. At the time, I was 53 or 4, when I started thinking about this, and neither one of those two options were particularly attractive. I didn't know a lot about decor. I didn't want to start learning a whole new business or maybe hiring somebody to handle it for me. And closer to the end, at 52, 3, 4 years old, you're closer to the end than the beginning, and it wasn't really time in my heart, in my mind, to start dropping hundreds of thousands of dollars into opening new locations. And so I had something else, going on the side, my consulting business. And so I decided to get out when I did. But it was really what we're talking about now, just that change in the business model, that just a standalone paint store is just not enough anymore. Some are going in the direction of decor, which I think is a great model. A lot of retailers are going in the direction of hardware, which I also think is a dynamite model. We're seeing a lot of that, at least in the United States. And so there's lots of ways to adapt your business so that you can still throw a broad enough net to be successful, right? But for sure, paint is no longer enough if your plan is to just have a single location.
It's very true. And now, in order to really grow your business even more, you have we have the additional challenges of staffing.
That's right.
Yeah, which is, of course, a problem everywhere in every industry right now. I'm not sure where all the people went, but
is that happening in Canada as well? In the United
horrible.
States, they call that the Great Resignation. Apparently, like, millions of people have dropped out of the workforce.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's happening here as well. I don't know where everybody went or what's happening here. There's different different conversations around it, and part of it is basically the demographic of kind of where we are is the 60-ish plus people that finally just they were working part-time and just keeping busy and not necessarily having to have to work, and just said, I don't need this anymore when COVID hit.
Yeah.
Right.
And so has finding people been a big problem for you guys in the last couple of years?
Huge problem.
Yeah.
Huge problem. Yeah.
And how are you overcoming that?
We work 6 days a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another reason why I'm glad I sold my stores.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. I mean, we're open 7 days a week, so I'm grateful I do get that one day, but but it's tough. It's tough right now. Yeah.
Yeah. No, my father did, 11 hours a day, 6 days a week for the entirety of his career. Basically, just at the end when I came in, he would take an occasional half day to play some golf or something. But that's really the small retailer's lament, is just how hard it is to be able to afford enough staff to be able to give you the freedom of lifestyle that you want. And that's one of the reasons why 4 and 5 store and bigger chains are often, in fact, easier to manage than single store or even 2 store retailers. Because if all the 1 store retailers I know, all of them spend at least some amount of time behind their counter, right? They're working with customers at the counter, they're answering their own phones, etc. That is a really time-consuming process for somebody who's trying to make time to do high-level stuff that grows their business, marketing or even sales or phone calls or whatever it is they want to work on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's the old adage of working on your business instead of in your business,
right,
is so important, but you're unable to do it right now just because of that.
Right. Yeah. That's right. And that problem is not going to go away, even when the labor situation sort of levels out, which it will eventually. Yeah. That problem for single store dealers is not going to go away. That's in fact the very challenge that we all live with.
Yeah, no, it's very true. It's very true.
So switching gears to our last topic, I noticed on your website that you guys, which by the way, you have a terrific website.
Thank you.
I noticed on your website that you guys are engaged with Facebook and Instagram. And so what are some of the digital things that you're doing to sort of help promote and market your business?
Well, a lot of the Facebook and Instagram aspect of things I have one of my staff is doing most of that. I have an interior design student that can do a lot of different things for me, which is helpful. So yes, it's a lot of marketing online now, which is where people tend to gravitate.
That's
you don't
where
do
word of mouth is
anymore. Yeah.
Right. Word of mouth is online in a world where people don't want to talk to their neighbors, which they don't, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the world has changed. People don't talk to their neighbors anymore. And in that kind of environment, how else is word of mouth going to spread? You can't put word of mouth in a newspaper.
No, and it's so true. And I mean, the reviews are really important, trying to get reviews from your customers. That's really important. So the word of mouth is huge for us, because we've been in the community for so long. That's really a good thing. And we're starting to get back into perhaps doing some events. We used to do fundraising events for like the Crossroads Hospice and get people out, or for the food bank, and people would bring items, and then we'd have things going on for the kids and stuff. And of course that got shut down for a few years. And
right, because of COVID.
Yeah.
One of the things that retailers have asked me, when we talk about digital marketing, is how do they measure like the sales that it generates? And that's a fair question, right? Because of course you should never be spending money in your business without doing some sort of measurement of what kind of return you're getting. But beyond that, there has to be some understanding that the name of your business needs to get out into the market. And even if there's costs associated with that can't necessarily be directly measured, like doing an event doesn't create a sale of a gallon of paint necessarily, right? But what it did do was make 50 more people aware that Tri-City Paint Design Center exists,
That's right. It's an awareness, and being online is definitely where you need to be, but there's so much noise, right? Everybody's online, right? So you still want to have that human contact.
That's right.
I find even since COVID, people are fatigued with their computers and their devices. So they're actually starting to disconnect more and going back to what you and I were used to many years ago, before we had this, before we were so connected.
Yep. And trying to get people together that might be inclined to talk about your business, right? That's really what you're trying to do, is to get the word out that we exist.
That's right. Yeah.
Last question, Toma. While we were doing our prep, you had mentioned the Color Marketing Group, which I had never heard of before. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, the Color Marketing Group is an international organization. They have memberships from, there's the North American arm, which is the one that I belong to. There's Europe, Asia Pacific, Latin America. And what we do is we pay attention to what is happening in the world and in our communities, and how that affects color trends. Because color trends really aren't determined by a round table of people drinking wine and say, hey,
although they should be.
Although there should be, yes. Right. That's where the naming of the colors comes in.
Right.
But it's really a very scientific process, and a lot of people aren't aware of that. And so to me, it's a fascinating part of the human psyche as to how events really affect the colors that are popular, what's going to sell in cars, or in your advertising, or in the Nike shoes, or whatever it is, your water bottles. What color are people going to gravitate towards too? And that's what we do. We collaborate and predict them 2 years in advance. And that gives me a bit of an insight that is beneficial for my clients. Not that trends are critically important to all of them, but they're interesting. And for me, I think it's kind of downplayed, or it's an organization that perhaps isn't as given as much validity in our business down at the grassroots level as it perhaps should be.
So Toma, we're just about at the end of our time. Do you have any final thoughts as we wrap it up?
I think what we just really need to remember is that we have to be able to pivot in our businesses. and really still take the time to find a few hours in the day to really enjoy life, because being an entrepreneur and living the dream 6 days a week is not always easy. But it's a fun business. It's kind of gets into your blood and under your skin.
And I think that's great advice, particularly for the single and small chain, the 1 and 2 store operators. I think that's great advice, because I was one myself, and you do have a tendency to let the business sort of take your life over. And if you're not careful about that, it becomes too much, and it'll embitter you towards your business over a long period of time. And so I think that's fabulous advice, Toma, and I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much.
So Toma Doring of Tri-City Paint Design Center, thank you so much for being on my show today. I really enjoyed our time together and getting to know you.
Thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate you giving a Canadian some time. It's been a pleasure.